Right, hello. Get comfortable. Whatever comfortable looks like for you at this hour. So here's the thing about the Amazing World of Gumball. It's a show about a blue cat, made for 7-year-olds, and it won 8 BAFTA Children's Awards. It also contains a found-footage zombie outbreak, a character who knows he's fictional, and resents the main character for it, and a running argument about what happens to people the world stops bothering to look at. Both of those are true at the same time. That's what we're wandering through tonight. What I've done is pick out the darker corners of this show and lay them side by side at an easy pace, with no ranking and nothing building towards anything. Every part is finished by the time the next one starts. So if you're asleep before I've got to the peanut, you have not been left holding a loose end. There aren't any. One bit of admin, and then I'll stop. Subscribing costs you nothing and keeps this sort of thing viable, so if you're inclined, do. Now forget I said it, because I won't ask again. Fair warning that a few of these go somewhere heavier than a cartoon about a blue cat has any business going. I'll keep a light touch on those. The rest of it is just me being far too interested in a children's programme. Let's start underneath the town. There is a place underneath Elmore where the universe keeps its mistakes. That's it. That's the concept. And I want to sit with how odd it is that a children's cartoon on Cartoon Network decided, in its 3rd season, that the correct next step for its world building was to establish a literal dimension full of things reality got wrong and then quietly forgot about. The episode that introduces it is called The Void. The setup is that a girl called Molly Collins goes missing. Molly is a background character. She's a little green dinosaurish girl who's been in the show since fairly early on, and she has said maybe a handful of lines total, and one day she just isn't there anymore, and nobody notices. That's the horror engine of the whole episode, and it's such a specific thing to build a story around. It's not that something took her, it's that she stopped mattering enough for the world to keep hold of her. The universe did a sort of quality control pass, and she didn't clear the bar. And what the boys find when they go looking is this vast grey non-place, full of stuff that got binned. Animation errors, half-finished concepts, bits of scenery that don't line up. Continuity mistakes the show made and then patched over. Characters who were drawn once and never drawn again. It's presented as a sort of cosmic recycling centre, except nothing gets recycled. Things just sit there. The way out is a van. Mr. Small, the school's counsellor, has a van called Janice, and Janice is apparently capable of leaving. That's not really explained, and I've never wanted it explained. Mr. Small is the kind of character where the correct amount of explanation is none. So they get Molly, they get in the van, they drive out. Everyone goes home. Molly is restored to Elmore's memory. Job done, roll credits, back to episodes about hot dogs. Except there was someone else down there. Right, so this is Rob, and I want to do Rob properly because he is genuinely one of the more interesting antagonists in kids' animation, and his whole existence is a little bit of a magic trick the writers pulled with material that was already sitting on the shelf. Rob, before any of this, was a background student at Elmore Junior High. He appears in the first 2 seasons. He's a tall, slim blue cyclops with one big eye and long skinny limbs, and he's the sort of character who exists to fill out a corridor shot or sit at a desk in the background of a classroom. He is set dressing. He is a design that got drawn because a scene needed bodies in it, and then the show stopped using him, which happens constantly in animation. And half the background cast of any long-running cartoon quietly fades out because nobody on the writing staff ever finds a reason to give them a line. Gumball took that ordinary production fact and made it lethal. Because Rob became irrelevant, and so Rob went into the void. Now here's the bit that I think is properly clever, and it's the bit that reframes the void entirely on a rewatch. When Gumball and Darwin were down there getting Molly out, Rob was there. He saw them. He tried to get their attention. He asked them for help, and they walked straight past him because they were focused on the girl they'd actually come for. And because Rob is by design a person your eye slides off. And then they left, and he made a run for it. He caught the back of the van as it was going and held on, and the trip out tore him apart. That's the explanation for what he looks like from season 3 onwards, which is this glitching, hunched, patched together thing with static where his face should be and an eye that doesn't sit right anymore. He didn't get transformed by some villain ray. He got dragged out of a place he wasn't supposed to leave, and the exit cost him his body. He also lost his memory on the way, which brings us to The Nobody, which is the episode where all of this actually gets laid out, and which I'd put among the strangest half hours the show ever produced. Not the darkest necessarily, the strangest. The premise is that things have been going missing from the Watterson house. Food, objects, small everyday stuff. And Gumball and Darwin work out that somebody has been living in their home. Not visiting, living. For months, moving around the house in the gaps between them, sleeping somewhere in the walls or the basement, eating their food, using their things, never once being seen. That is, if you think about it for more than 4 seconds, a horror premise. That's the plot of a fairly grim film. In Gumball, it's played mostly for jokes for the first half, with a lot of business about how you'd physically hide in a suburban house. And it's very funny. And then the tone quietly shifts, because they find him. And he's not threatening. He's frightened. And when they ask him who he is, he tells them he's nobody, that he doesn't have a name, that he doesn't have a family, has never had parents or siblings, and doesn't have anywhere he's supposed to be. He ended up in their house because it was somewhere, and he needed to be somewhere. I find that a genuinely rough scene to watch, and the reason it lands is that the show doesn't score it as sad. There's no swelling strings. He just says it, flatly, because it's true, and then waits to see what they'll do about it. What they do about it is try to help. This is the part that gets me every time. Gumball and Darwin decide that what this poor bloke needs is a role, a place in Elmore, a thing to be. So they start listing off the available jobs, the available social slots, the available identities in town, and they run through them, and everything decent is taken. Every good position in Elmore already has somebody in it. And eventually, they arrive at the one gap in the roster. Elmore doesn't have a villain, so they suggest it, cheerfully, as a favour. 2 12-year-olds trying to be kind to a homeless stranger with amnesia offer him their only career opening in town, which is being their enemy. And it works. Saying the word out loud shakes something loose, and his memory comes back, and he remembers the void, and he remembers being left there, and he remembers exactly who walked past him. So the villain of the Amazing World of Gumball is a job that the heroes gave him out of pity, based on a vacancy they described to him, moments before he remembered they were the reason he needed a job in the first place. No notes. That's a very good bit of writing, and there's a fun detail hanging off all this that I keep coming back to. Rob is the only character in the entire show who consistently remembers the void. Everyone else who's been down there gets their memory wiped, or gets rewound, or the timeline shifts under them, and the whole thing quietly stops having happened. Rob doesn't. He's the one person in Elmore carrying an accurate picture of what the town actually is and what's underneath it, and he is also the least equipped person in Elmore to do anything useful with that information. There's also something a bit sad in the sheer smallness of what he originally wanted. He says later, in a different episode we'll get to at some point tonight, that he never wanted to be the bad guy at all. What he wanted was to be a sidekick, a cute one. That was the ambition. Not power, not revenge, not the end of the world. He wanted to be the funny little friend who stands next to the hero in the promotional art. And he got the void instead. And then he got the villain job, and he was never really any good at that either, but we'll come back round to it. Anyway, that's the lore-heavy one, and I've put it first deliberately, so it's out of the way, and we can wander somewhere completely different for a bit. Let's talk about the episode where everyone in the school gets extremely happy, and it kills them. Actually, hang on, before we move on, there are a couple of extra bits about the void itself that I want to get in because they're the sort of detail that makes the whole concept better. The first is what's actually visible down there. Because the void isn't just grey emptiness. It's got stuff in it, and the stuff is specific. There are objects that reference the real world, as well as the show's own internal history. There are half-finished character designs. There are elements that clearly never made it out of a development folder. The joke, layered underneath the plot, is that the writers are showing you the cutting room floor of their own production and calling it a place. Which is a fairly cheeky thing to do with a Cartoon Network budget, and it means that on rewatch you end up pausing constantly to squint at the background, because you're never quite sure whether the thing you're looking at is a deliberate design or an in-joke about something they actually scrapped. The second bit is Mr. Small. Mr. Small is the school counsellor. He's a floating yellow head with a body. He's a committed hippie, and his advice is uniformly useless. And he owns the only vehicle in Elmore that can apparently drive out of a metaphysical prison. The show never explains this, not once. He just has a van, the van is called Janice, and Janice can leave. And I've come round to thinking that's the correct amount of explanation, because Mr. Small operates on a level where questions don't really apply. He's the sort of character where every additional fact you learn about him makes the overall picture less clear rather than more. There's a whole episode where the family visits his home and it does not clarify anything. The third bit is Rob's voice, which has a slightly sad production story attached to it. Rob has been played by a few different people. For a stretch of the show's middle seasons, across some of his biggest episodes, he was voiced by David Warner. David Warner, who was in Tron and Titanic and about 200 other things, and who had one of the great English voices of his generation, spent a portion of his late career playing a glitching Cyclops in a Cartoon Network cartoon. He was excellent at it, obviously. He was excellent at everything. Charles Phillip took the role for a good long run either side of that, and in the revival, it changed hands again. Which, given everything the show has to say about identity being unstable and voices not staying put, is either a coincidence or the universe doing a bit. One last thing on Rob, and then I'll genuinely move on. He turns up in the comics. There was a Boom Studios comic series based on the show, running from 2014 across 8 issues, plus a set of original graphic novels. And in one of them, there's a background panel in a supermarket with a character in it who looks exactly like Rob did before the void. Tall, blue, one eye intact, just a bloke doing his shopping. Nothing happening to him, nobody paying attention, which is, when you think about it, the most accurate depiction of the character anyone has ever produced. The first thing to know about this one is that it isn't shot like a Gumball episode. It's shot like a found footage horror film. Most of the joy is presented through Miss Simeon's camcorder. Handheld, wobbly, bits of the frame going out of focus, the occasional moment where she puts it down on a surface, and you're stuck with whatever angle she happened to leave it at. It's the visual language of every low-budget outbreak film you've ever half-watched at 2 a.m, and it is being deployed in a cartoon about a blue cat who is worried about it being Monday. Because that is genuinely where it starts. Gumball and Darwin are in a mood. It's Monday. They're being grumpy about it at the breakfast table, in the way children are grumpy about Mondays, which is to say, enormously, and with full commitment. And Richard, who is their dad, and who has never in his life correctly assessed a situation, decides to fix it with a hug. Not a normal hug, a wonder hug. It's presented as this special family maneuver, a big warm dad-shaped intervention, and honestly, the setup is lovely. It's the sort of thing that, in almost any other show, would be the emotional beat of the episode. Dad hugs the sad kids. Kids feel better. Everyone learns something about Mondays. They do feel better. That's the problem. What follows is a slow slide that the episode is very patient about, First they're cheerful, then they're a bit too cheerful, then they're cheerful in a way that stops responding to context, so they're beaming through things nobody should beam through, and the smiles aren't changing shape between sentences. Then their pupils dilate until their eyes read as black. Then the rainbow drool starts, and I want to flag that specific creative choice because it's the thing that makes this episode stick in people's heads. A normal zombie drools something horrible. Blood, bile, whatever. These ones drool rainbow. It is bright and colourful and cheerful, and it is coming out of the mouth of a child with black eyes who is walking towards you with their arms open. Because that's the transmission method. Hugging. They spread it by hugging you. There's an ugly little detail in the mechanics here that the episode delivers without dwelling on it, which is that the excessive joy actually kills the hosts. Gumball and Darwin die of it several hours in, and then they get back up, and they're smiling, and that's when the outbreak proper starts, which is such a bleak joke. The infection is fatal, and then it keeps you working afterwards. From there, it does exactly what an outbreak film does. It moves through the school building. It takes the corridors first, then the classrooms. Kids you recognise from 4 seasons of background gags start turning up with the eyes and the smiles. Tobias tries to hide in a bathroom and gets dragged out. The population of Elmore Junior High converts one hug at a time, and every single one of them looks delighted about it. Now Miss Simeon is the boys' teacher, and she is comfortably the least pleasant adult in the show. She's a fossilised monkey who has been teaching at that school for hundreds of thousands of years. She openly despises children, and her defining trait across the whole series is a kind of dried-out contempt for everyone in her care. She is also, in this episode, the only person who understands what's happening. And that's the structure the episode builds itself on. She works it out early. She's right about all of it. She tells people nobody believes her, partly because it sounds insane, and partly because she's Miss Simeon, and nobody in that building is inclined to take her side about anything. So she's stuck being correct and ignored while the school fills up with grinning children. There's a moment where the nurse and Principal Brown finally see the evidence, and she does a little victory dance about being right, which is completely tonally wrong for the situation, and which is also exactly what she'd do. She's more pleased about winning the argument than she is bothered about the 2 students who have apparently just died. It's a horrible little character beat, and I love it. And then there's the ending, because by the end she's alone, and she knows she's not going to get out. And so she does the thing that people in these films do. She records a message, she sets the camera down, and she talks to whoever finds the tape, and she explains the cure. The cure involves a particular piece of music, and she cannot remember what it's called. She tries. She gets part way there and stops. She tries to hum it instead so that whoever's watching can at least recognise the tune, and she can't do that either. She's a teacher who has spent her entire absurdly long career being the cleverest and most cynical person in the room, and the one time it counts, the information just isn't there. And while she's still trying, they get to her. Cut. That's the episode. There's no cavalry, there's no fix in the last 30 seconds. The status quo does eventually reset, because it's a cartoon and next week is next week. But within the borders of the joy, nothing is resolved. The outbreak wins. The thing I keep coming back to is the smiles. A snarling zombie is a monster, and your brain files it correctly. A zombie that looks thrilled to see you does something else. It puts the horror in a place your instincts aren't set up for, because everything on the surface is reading as safe and warm and friendly. The show is using its own visual sweetness as the weapon. And it's worth saying that this episode is funny. Genuinely funny throughout. The camcorder gag alone carries a load of jokes, and Simeon is a great comic engine. It's not a grim episode to watch. It's a very silly one that happens to be built on a premise that would work perfectly well as straight horror if you removed about 4 gags and slowed the footage down. Here's a fun detail. The unresolved ending has given this episode an unusually long afterlife in fan writing. Because the show never says what happens to Elmore after the credits, people have spent years filling that in themselves, and there's a decent-sized body of horror fan fiction that treats the joy as the starting point of an actual apocalypse. It's one of the only Gumball episodes with a genuine fan fiction industry attached to its aftermath rather than its characters. And that's entirely because the writers didn't bother to shut the door. One last bit before we move on. The single most alarming design in the episode is Nicole. Nicole is Gumball's mum. She catches it too, and the combination of the infection's black eyes and rainbow drool with her existing build and posture produces something that doesn't read as a goofy smiling zombie at all. She reads as rabid. She's noticeably worse than everyone else in the scene, and the reason for that is not the virus, which is a decent moment to talk about her properly, because Nicole Watterson is, I'd argue, the darkest thing in this show. And she isn't an episode, she's a thread. Before we leave this one, 2 extra things. The first is Miss Simeon, because I've realised I referred to her career being absurdly long without explaining what I meant. Miss Simeon is presented as a prehistoric primate who has been alive and teaching for something in the region of 300,000 years. That's the joke. She's been in that job since before agriculture, and the show is consistent about it. Her contempt for children is not the ordinary tiredness of a teacher a few years in. It is the accumulated contempt of somebody who has watched an enormous number of generations of children fail to improve on the previous batch, which makes her the ideal person to hand a horror film to, because she has no illusions to lose. She's not frightened of the outbreak in the way the other adults are. She's just annoyed about it, and then briefly triumphant about it, and then it gets her. She's the only person in Elmore whose reaction to the apocalypse is professional. The second thing is that the joy is not a one-off. It sits in a run of episodes where the show got quite interested in what it could do to bodies. There's a bit in an episode called The Hero, where Gumball and Darwin get food from the clearance aisle, and the sequence is a straight escalation of decay. A banana wilts while Gumball is eating it. Meat goes rotten the moment the packaging opens, and then it's covered in maggots. And then the maggots hatch into flies, and the flies fill the entire frame. The last item is a can with a live rat in it, sitting in green liquid. None of that is a plot point. It's a gag about supermarkets. There's an episode called The Burden, with a musical number in it built around live-action close-ups of hair, with a loud buzzing under it. And it is one of the more genuinely upsetting 90 seconds in the series, despite being, technically, a song about a chore. And there's The Test, where Gumball tries to stop being sarcastic, and it poisons him. Physically poisons him. And while he's out of action, Tobias takes over his life, and crucially takes over the show, which turns into a bland, conventional sitcom for a stretch. Gumball's response when he sees Tobias with Penny is to melt his face off. So the thing to understand about the joy is that it isn't an outlier. It's the most sustained example of a mode the show had available at all times and dipped into whenever it fancied. There's a small real-world footnote to it as well, which I'll mention because I found it interesting and then immediately wished I hadn't looked it up. There is an actual condition, sometimes referred to as laughing sickness, which is a prion disease, and it is nothing like the joy virus in any meaningful way, except that the name got attached to it because of how it presents. It's rare, it's not remotely contagious by hugging, and it is genuinely grim. I mention it only because a few people have drawn the comparison online, and I'd rather say clearly that the episode is not based on it. The writers were doing zombie films. That's the whole reference pool. Nicole is the one where I have to be a bit careful, because it would be very easy to do the thing the internet does with her, which is to treat her as a meme about an angry mum. And that's not really what's on the screen. What's on the screen is a woman in her 30s who is holding an entire household together on her own, who has never once been given a break by anything, and whose rage is treated by the show as a punchline for about 5 seasons, and as a symptom for about 5 minutes at a time when it feels like being honest. Let's start with the loud one, because everyone knows the loud one. The Limit is the episode where she goes properly off. The setup is small and domestic and completely recognisable to anyone who has ever been the person in a family who says no. The kids want something. She says no. They push. They push again. They keep pushing in that specific, relentless way children have when they've correctly identified that the adult is tired and might crack. And she does. She cracks. What follows is a sustained rampage through a shopping centre, and the show plays it as an action sequence. And it is very funny, and there are a couple of details in it that are not funny at all if you look directly at them. The first is her spine. She's limping through the whole thing. The animation gives her this crooked, wrong posture because the effort of holding herself together for that long has physically bent her. That's not a gag the episode calls attention to. It's just there, in the walk cycle, for anyone who notices. The second is the security guard. He tries to stop her, she looks at him, and the fright turns his hair white. And his eyes, and he ages, visibly, on the spot, and then he goes down and can't breathe properly. A man has a medical event because a mother looked at him. And the third is the line. Gumball asks what's wrong with Mum, and Richard tells him that isn't his mother anymore. That's a whirlwind of fury, which is a great line, and the delivery's great, and it's also the show going, in as many words, that the woman is gone, and what's left is the pressure. Here's the bit that I think gets skipped when people talk about this episode. Before any of it happens, she warns them. She tells everyone to run. She knows what's coming, she knows she can't stop it, and the last thing she does while she's still herself is give people time to get clear. That's not a monster. That's somebody who has been living with this for a very long time and has a procedure for it. Now. The choices. This is the one where the show stops pretending, and I'd put it among the 2 or 3 best things Gumball ever did. The framing is that Nicole is having a day in the way that people have days, and she starts thinking back. And what we get is a flashback to how she met Richard, which is genuinely one of the loveliest sequences in the series. All soft light and young people being idiots at each other. Underneath that, though, is what she was doing before she met him. And what she was doing was being raised. Her parents had a plan for her. A very specific, very demanding, very complete plan. And the flashback shows a childhood that was essentially a training program with a person somewhere inside it. There was no version of her life that she picked. Every hour of it had been assigned. And meeting Richard in that context isn't a romance in the normal sense. It's a defection. It's her walking away from the entire architecture of her life towards a large pink rabbit who has never had a plan for anything, and choosing that on purpose, which the show frames as brave, and I think it is, but the episode is not naive about it, because the question the whole thing is built around, the one that's actually driving it in the present day, is whether she made the right call. And it does not answer that, not cleanly. It gets close to answering it, and it lands on something warm rather than something conclusive, and then it lets you go. That is a children's cartoon doing a full, sincere, honest episode about a woman auditing her own life at 2 a.m. on Cartoon Network, between an episode about a video game and an episode about Wi-Fi. I don't know how they got that made. I'm glad they did. Then there's The Fury, which is the other side of the same coin and which handles it completely differently. The Fury is where the rage gets an actual origin and an actual opponent. It brings back someone from Nicole's past, and the whole thing turns into an anime. Not a reference to an anime. An anime. The animation style changes entirely for the fight, with the speed lines and the impact frames and the whole visual grammar of a proper shonen bout, and the two of them go at each other across the town. And the way I read that episode, and I'll admit this is me projecting a bit, is that the anime treatment is a release valve. The show has spent years building up a genuinely heavy interior for this character, and it has no intention of making a sad drama out of it. So instead, it gives her a boss fight. She gets to have the confrontation. It gets to be exciting instead of miserable. Everyone goes home. That's a legitimate choice, and I don't hold it against them. But it does mean the material never quite gets paid off. It gets discharged. There's a pattern in how the show handles her that I've only really clocked on rewatches, which is that Gumball is consistently funnier about Nicole than it is kind to her. The jokes about her are excellent. The jokes are among the best in the show, but she is very rarely allowed to just be fine. Something is always being extracted from her. She's the one who works. She's the one who worries. She's the one who fixes things. And when she finally snaps, the snapping is the entertainment. I'm genuinely not sure whether that's a criticism of the show or just an accurate description of the situation it's depicting, which might be the point. One last thing on her, and it's a small one. Everyone in Elmore is scared of Nicole. Not in a jokey way. Tina Rex is a literal tyrannosaur, and Tina finds her frightening. Gumball is more afraid of his own mother in a bad mood than he is of a dinosaur, and the show treats that as simply correct, which means the most dangerous person in that town by some distance is a working mum with no support, and a very long fuse that has been burning since before the series started. Right, that's enough of that. Let's go back to the person who wanted to take her son's entire world away from him. A few more bits on the Watterson household while we're here, because Nicole doesn't exist in isolation, and the household is where most of the pressure comes from. Richard first. Richard is a 6'4" pink rabbit who does not work and has never worked, and the show is completely open about the fact that Nicole carries the family financially. That's not subtext. There's an episode where he gets a job and it's treated as a genuine event. And the thing about Richard is that he isn't malicious, and he isn't lazy in the way sitcom dads are usually lazy. He's incapable. The show goes to the trouble of showing you why, eventually, with his own father and his own upbringing, and what you get is a man who has never taught anything and who has arranged his entire life around not being asked to learn, which is funny. It is very funny. Dan Russell's performance is one of the great vocal comedy jobs in modern animation, and I'd defend that. It also means that every single thing that has to be done in that house is done by one person. Then there's Granny Jojo, Richard's mum, who is a recurring source of chaos and who has a whole strand about her own second act with Louis. And there's an episode called The Fuss, which is about Nicole's special day being forgotten by the entire family, and her trying and failing to pretend she doesn't mind. That's another one that's played mostly as a comedy of errors, with Richard frantically trying to work out what he's forgotten, and underneath it is a woman sitting in a house waiting for 4 people to notice her. That's the pattern I mentioned earlier, in its purest form. There's a production detail here I think is worth knowing, because it changes how you hear the show. Teresa Gallagher voices Nicole. She also voices Penny. She also voices a substantial proportion of the female cast of Elmore. She has been there since the pilot material, and she is still there in the revival, which makes her, along with Dan Russell, one of only 2 constants across the entire 15 years of this thing. So a huge amount of the emotional weight in Gumball, across 2 different shows and multiple recastings of the children, is being carried by the same 2 people. The kids' voices came and went. The parents never changed, which is quite a nice accidental piece of casting symbolism for a show about a family, and I don't think anybody planned it that way. It's just what happens when you cast adults to play adults. One final Nicole thing, and it's about her job. She works at the Rainbow Factory. What the Rainbow Factory actually produces is never satisfactorily established. Her boss is unpleasant, and the work appears to be tedious in the specific way that real jobs are tedious rather than in the exaggerated way cartoon jobs usually are. There's no arc where she gets out of it. She never gets promoted into something better. She never quits and finds herself. 6 seasons, 2 shows, 15 years, and she's still at the Rainbow Factory, which is either the bleakest running gag in the show or just an accurate description of most people's working lives, and I've never quite decided which. The weapon in this one is a remote control. Not a metaphorical remote, an actual handheld remote control with buttons on it, bought from a bloke in a van that happens to work on reality instead of on a television. The van is the awesome store, which is a recurring thing in Gumball. It's a van that turns up when the plot needs an item, run by a shady man who sells things he almost certainly should not be selling to people who almost certainly should not be buying them. It's a lovely running gag right up until the moment somebody uses it properly. Rob buys the remote, and the first thing he does with it, to his credit, is test it sensibly. He fiddles with an ATM, he works out roughly what it can do, he's methodical about it, which is not something you'd expect from him, because up to this point, Rob has been a comprehensively rubbish villain. He'd had a whole episode, The Nemesis, in which Gumball had to actively coach him on how to be a threat, because he was so bad at it that it was becoming embarrassing for everybody. So he's had a run of failures, and then he gets a device that edits the universe, and he stops messing about. What he does with it is the reason this episode has the reputation it has, and I'm going to go through it fairly plainly, because the horror of the sequence is in the method rather than in any big dramatic moment. He doesn't attack Gumball, he works through Gumball's life, removing the people in it, one at a time, in the correct order. He starts with the family as a unit. He sends cars piling into the Wattersons' car, with all of them inside it, and the wreck ends with the family sitting on top of a heap of smashed vehicles. And then, because a crash on its own is just a crash, he arranges the framing so that it looks like Gumball caused it. Gumball had been playing with the window, so as far as his own family's concerned, he did this. Then Darwin. This is the bit people talk about. Rob turns on subtitles. That's it. That's the mechanism. He puts captions on reality and then edits them, so that when Gumball speaks, what Darwin sees written underneath is not what Gumball is saying. And what the captions say are the worst available things, aimed at the softest available spot, which is that Darwin is adopted. Darwin can hear his brother's voice, and read something else at the same time, and he believes the text. I think that's the single nastiest idea in the show. It's not violence, it's a man reaching into somebody's life and altering the record of what was said. And it works instantly, because it's designed to confirm a thing Darwin has clearly worried about for years. Then the parents, he edits their personalities, just nudges them, adjusts a couple of settings, and lets the marriage come apart on its own. He doesn't have to do anything else after that. He's changed the inputs and the outcome takes care of itself. Then Ananias, he turns the brightness down. That's all. The world dims and a distraught little girl walks off into it and can't be found. Then Penny. He frames Gumball for cheating on her, gets them into an argument on a balcony, and then Gumball pushes her off it by accident. And at the end of that, having removed everyone, he throws the remote into the void. Which means the only way to undo any of it is to go in after it. So Gumball jumps, and Rob seals the portal behind him. Then the episode does the thing that makes it properly memorable, which is that the end credits roll on the surface of the void itself, with Gumball inside it. The show's own credit sequence is being displayed on the inside of the place where cancelled things go. It's a small trick, and it's an excellent one. Now the motive, because the motive is what makes Rob interesting rather than just unpleasant. He explains it during all this, and he's very clear. He never wanted to be the villain. He says that outright. What he believes is that the universe revolves around Gumball, that Gumball is the fixed point everything else is arranged around. and that as long as Gumball exists, every other character's role is defined in relation to him. Rob got assigned enemy, that's the slot. He can't get out of it while the centre is still there. So the plan isn't revenge exactly. The plan is to remove the centre and see what he becomes afterwards, which is a coherent argument. He's not wrong about the physics of his world. He's living in a show with a protagonist, and he has correctly identified that fact and correctly identified what it costs him. Where he falls down is that when Gumball asks him what he'd actually do with the freedom, with an object in his hand that can rewrite anything at all, he admits he doesn't know. He wouldn't know what to do without Gumball. He has built an entire worldview around being the opposite of somebody, and he has no idea who he is when that person is gone. That's the tragedy of him in one exchange, and it's why he never quite works as a straightforward bad guy. Then there's the rerun. Gumball in the void finds the remote. The batteries have come out. He puts them back and presses rewind, and the episode starts again. The rerun replays the same day with Gumball carrying full knowledge of everything that's about to happen, which is a lovely structure for a show this meta to be playing with. He knows the subtitle trick is coming, so when Rob switches the captions on, Gumball rearranges the letters and turns them into something that pulls Darwin onto his side instead. He gets ahead of the beats, and then it goes wrong in completely different ways because that's how these things go. Rob tries to use the eject function on Darwin, Gumball intervenes, and Banana Joe gets ejected instead, which is very funny and also quite grim. There's an attempt at fixing the parents that turns them into babies. A time paradox turns up. The second run is not tidier than the first, it's just wrong in a new direction. And the way it ends is the thing. Because the positions reverse and it's Rob who ends up going into the void. And Gumball, having spent 2 full episodes being systematically destroyed by this man, goes in after him. Rob runs from the rescue. That's the detail that stays with me. He doesn't fight it. He doesn't take the hand, he runs, because in his own head, he has failed at the only task he was given, and therefore he belongs down there with the rest of the universe's mistakes. He'd rather be filed correctly than be saved. He does get out, and he shows mercy at the end in a small way that costs him. And here's a fun bit of trivia hanging off that. Gumball characters turned up in a villainous crossover short, which is a Cartoon Network property about a villain training organisation. And in it, Rob is put through their programme and graded, and he's marked down as a failure. The specific reason cited is the mercy he showed in the rerun. A different show watched these 2 episodes and concluded he wasn't ruthless enough, which is honestly a fair assessment. Anyway, let's get away from all this for a bit because the next one is a completely different, kind of strange, and it involves real puppets. 2 things I want to add before we move on, because both of them make these episodes read better. The first is the Awesome Store, which I mentioned in passing and then skated over. It's a van. It turns up in various episodes, always parked somewhere slightly wrong, and it's run by a man who is only ever called the Shady Man. He sells items, the items work. That's the whole gimmick, and it's used sparingly enough across the run that it never gets tired. What makes it good is that he's not a villain, and he's not a wise mentor either. He's a retailer. He sells you a universe editing device, the same way a corner shop sells you batteries, with no particular interest in what you're planning, and the transactional flatness of it is the joke. And the reason he matters is that the Awesome Store is one of the very few pieces of the show's furniture that turns out to be load-bearing later on. Something that started as a gag about dodgy street traders ends up being structurally important to how the whole thing wraps up. But I'll leave that where it belongs, which is at the end of the night. The second thing is Rob's run of failures, because the contrast is what makes the disaster land. The nemesis is the one where Gumball actively trains him. Rob has declared himself the villain. He's genuinely trying, and he's so bad at it that Gumball ends up coaching him through it, out of what appears to be embarrassment. They give him a costume. They give him a name, Dr. Wrecker. They workshop his approach. It is a superhero origin montage where the hero is building the villain because the villain wasn't meeting the standard. Then there's The Bus, which is Rob's most competent outing before the remote. And it's a hostage situation with a bomb on a bus and a ransom demand. Properly structured, actually threatening, and it still falls apart because he is fundamentally not a person who finishes things. So by the time the remote turns up, the audience has spent multiple episodes watching this man fail, which means the first act of The Disaster is doing something quite specific and quite uncomfortable, which is showing you a joke character stop being a joke. There's no moment where he transforms. He doesn't get a power-up or a speech. He just for once doesn't make a mistake. And the horror of that comes from the fact that the audience has been laughing at him for 2 seasons, which puts you in roughly the same position as Gumball and Darwin were in The Nobody when they were being kind to a stranger in their basement, which is, I suspect, exactly the point. This show is not subtle about its themes, but it is patient about them, and it will happily spend 20 episodes setting up a feeling it wants you to have in the 21st. I want to start this one with how it was made, because the production story is honestly better than the plot summary. The Puppets is the season 5 finale, and it was made in collaboration with Blink Industries, which is the London company behind Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. If you don't know Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, the short version is that it started as a web series in 2011, the same year Gumball started, and it looks like a children's puppet show from about 1975. 3 friendly felt characters get taught a lesson by a talking object. There's a song, and then it turns, every single time, into something quite upsetting, usually with a lot of gore in it, and usually without explaining itself. It's very British, very deadpan, and it built an enormous cult following almost entirely by word of mouth. Ben Bockley, who created Gumball, teased in 2015 that a crossover with an unnamed show was coming in season 5. Fans spent ages guessing. It turned out to be this, and they didn't do it as a reference. They handed over the second half of the episode. Becky Sloan and Joe Pelling, who created Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, are credited as co-writers on the episode. Sloan voices one of the puppets, Howdy. Baker Terry, who writes on their show, voices the other 2, Frank and Grady, and the second half was physically made the way they make their own series, which is with actual puppets on an actual set with actual cameras, which meant somebody had to build a felt Gumball. There's a puppet Gumball. He exists as a physical object. He's got a body made of yarn fuzz and an oversized tail. And he is, I'll be honest, incredibly cute in a way that undermines the entire tone the episode is going for. And I think they knew that and did it anyway. The set they used is the house from Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, the same one. They repainted it black and white and stripped out all the props, which is why the puppet world in the episode looks so bare and strange. It's a place you might recognise if you'd seen the web series wearing a different coat. Not counting the writing, the storyboarding or the design work, the puppet section alone took about 3 months to make, for roughly 5 minutes of a children's cartoon, and they screened it at the Annecy Animation Festival in June 2017, on its own as a piece of work, which tells you how the people involved felt about it. Right, the plot. Gumball and Darwin are up in the attic sorting out old toys for a garage sale. That's the whole premise, and it's a very ordinary one. And the episode gets a lot of mileage out of it before anything goes wrong. The toys are all 7 years old, which puts them right at the edge of the boy's actual memory. There's a digital pet, one of those little egg things, which Darwin assumes has run out of batteries and chucks away. As it goes, it spells out the words, "Clean me, nobody notices." I love that gag. It's about 2 seconds long and nobody in the episode reacts to it at all. Then there's a Mighty Flies toy that they mess about with until it starts cutting things in half, while Gumball does the voice of a commercial warning over the top, which is the sort of joke Gumball does better than almost anybody. And then they find the puppets, Frank, Grady and Howdy. Darwin is delighted, genuinely, uncomplicatedly delighted in the way Darwin is delighted about most things, and he starts wearing them constantly. On his hands, at the table, everywhere. It gets a bit much. Gumball, being a 12-year-old brother, throws them out. And then they come back because they're not finished. The reveal, when it lands, is not that the puppets are evil, it's that they're aggrieved. They've been in a box for 7 years. Before that, they were played with roughly. And they have spent the entire intervening period thinking about it. That's a vengeful, abandoned toy story, which is not new. Every toy franchise has flirted with it. What's different here is the register. These three are not menacing. They're chipper. They're helpful. They speak in flat, polite, extremely British voices, and Grady in particular delivers everything in a completely level tone regardless of what he's saying, and the flatness is worse than shouting would be. They take Darwin first. Gumball, refusing to accept the situation right up until his brother is gone, ends up reviving Grady in order to get him back, and Grady offers to guide him through the world of imagination to find Darwin, which is obviously a trap, and which Gumball obviously falls for, and which Grady turns out to have arranged with the other two the entire time. There's a song, because of course there's a song. It's deliberately repetitive and deliberately catchy, and it builds up to a punchline about hats. They only have 2 hats, so those are your only options. That's the lyric. It's a song about the absence of choice, delivered as a jingle. And then it gets interrupted abruptly by an instruction to begin preparing, which is the other DHMIS move. The cheerfulness doesn't fade out, it gets cut off. There's a lovely bit of self-reference in there as well. Frank says he and Darwin can count to the funnest number, and the number that appears is a 7 with eyes. That's the 7 years the puppets waited. It's also, and I don't think this is an accident, one more than the number of "Don't hug me, I'm scared" installments that existed at the time. The way out is Darwin, and it's very simple. He finds a thread and pulls it, and the puppets come apart because they're made of fabric, and that's what happens to fabric. Some people found that anticlimactic, and I understand why. If you came to this from "Don't hug me," I'm scared you were probably expecting something considerably more upsetting than a bit of unravelling. There were reviews at the time making exactly that point, that the episode never quite settles into being either show and sits awkwardly between the two. I don't really agree, but I get it. My reading is that this is the friendliest possible version of a genuinely horrible premise, and the friendliness is precisely what makes it stick. Nothing in it is gory, nothing in it is loud. It's just 3 polite objects who have been waiting a very long time and who have prepared some activities. And the episode ends with the boys holding a garage sale and selling the toys, which, if you think about it for a moment, means they have taken 3 sentient things that just tried to trap them in a mental prison and sold them to somebody's child for a couple of quid. Nobody in the episode comments on this either. There's a nice postscript as well. The Puppet World got expanded afterwards into a set of 13 shorts called Waiting for Gumball, which are just the puppets hanging around being themselves without any of the plot. They're lovely. They're also very odd, and if you want more of that specific texture, they're the thing to go and find. Since we're on the subject of things in this show that changed shape permanently, let's talk about Penny. While we're on production, this is probably the right moment to talk about how Gumball is physically made, because the puppet episode isn't actually as much of a departure as it looks. It's just the most extreme version of something the show does constantly. The founding idea from the very beginning was cartoon characters on real backgrounds. Bockley has said that he'd kept a folder of characters he'd designed for advertising work that never got used, and that when Cartoon Network's European studio asked its staff to pitch, he pulled that folder out and put all the rejects in a school together. And he knew from the start that he wanted them dropped against live-action backdrops. So Elmore is photographs, The town is built out of high-resolution stills and live-action plates, shot in and around London and dressed to read as suburban California, which is why the show looks like nothing else and why it has aged so unusually well. It isn't stylized, so it can't date the way a stylized look dates. It's just a photo of a street with a cat standing on it. The technical side of that is more work than it sounds. The art department has to light and shadow the animated characters, so they sit properly in a real photograph, which means matching ambient light and casting shadows that fall the way the actual light in the photo falls. Get it slightly wrong, and the whole thing looks like a sticker. Layered on top of that, you've got 2D animation, cutout animation, CG built in Maya, occasional stop motion, and whatever else a given gag requires. Characters are designed in whatever medium suits their origin, which is why a chin, a dinosaur, and a video game sprite can be in the same shot without any of it looking like a mistake. Boccalet described the whole approach in one interview as a big sandbox with all sorts of toys in it, and the point being that because it's already such a visual mess, you can drop something completely new in and it doesn't look out of place, which is exactly why they could hand half an episode to a puppet company and have it not feel like a stunt. The production itself has moved around a fair bit over the years. Pre-production and storyboarding happened in London. Season 1 had Boulder Media in Dublin and Dandelion Studios involved. From Season 2 onward, the bulk of the animation went to Studio Soy in Germany, and Soy stayed with it right through to the revival. So I have a nice line on their own website about it, which is that they only had about 10 people when Cartoon Network first hired them, initially just to make the teaser that would finance the show. They set up the technical pipeline in the first season and then took on the 2D in-betweening, rendering and compositing from the second. So the look of Gumball, the thing that makes it instantly recognizable, was built by a small German studio solving a problem nobody had really solved before, for a show nobody was sure would work. And it worked well enough that the same studio was still doing it 15 years later. I find that a genuinely lovely piece of continuity, and it's the sort of thing that never makes it into a video about a show, because it isn't a story. It's just some people doing good work for a long time. The Shell won at the British Animation Awards in 2016. It took Best Children's Series and the Children's Choice Award, which is a slightly strange sentence when you consider that it is an episode about a girl climbing out of her own body, while her family stands nearby, telling her not to. Here's the setup for anyone who's only half remembering it. Penny Fitzgerald is Gumball's crush for the first 4 seasons, and she is a peanut. That's her design, a cream-coloured peanut with antlers, in a cheerleading outfit, perfectly normal Elmore citizen, except she isn't a peanut, she's inside one. The shell is a shell. It's a thing her family wears, and it's been on her since before the show started, and the whole Fitzgerald culture is built around keeping it on. There's history there, and rules and expectations, and the general shape of the thing is that a Fitzgerald stays in their shell, because that's what a Fitzgerald does, and there is no further conversation to be had about it. And in the shell, it breaks. What I really like about the sequence is that it isn't played as a reveal. A reveal would be the shell coming off and something being underneath. What actually happens is closer to shedding, and the animation treats it as a physical process with weight to it. She comes out, and what comes out isn't fixed. She's a shapeshifter. What she looks like depends on what she's feeling, which she cannot fully control. And the first thing the episode does with that is have her turn into something enormous and frightening while she's upset, and have Gumball not flinch. That's the emotional core of it, and it's earned, because 4 seasons is a long runway for a kids' show to build a romance on. Fans have kept count of the shape-shifting since, because fans do that. She changes form across at least 8 episodes. The full dragon form specifically turns up at least 4 times, across the shell, the romantic, the transformation, and then again right at the very end of the original run, in a way we'll get to later on. There's a bit of trivia I find quietly satisfying here. Penny is the first character in the Amazing World of Gumball to undergo a permanent physical transformation. Rob is the second. So the two characters who spend the series looking fundamentally different from how they started are the love interest and the villain, and one of them changed by getting out of something, and the other changed by being dragged out of something. I don't think that's deliberate. I've decided to enjoy it anyway. Now the transformation, which is the one I actually want to spend time on, because it is genuinely unsettling and almost nothing threatening happens in it. The situation is a family argument. Penny's parents are on opposite sides of something, and they both want Gumball to back them up. And Gumball, being Gumball, tries to avoid picking, which is the wrong move, because the Fitzgeralds do not tolerate abstention, so they lean on him. Mrs. Fitzgerald gives him a biscuit. She's baked it, and the biscuit is shaped like Gumball in pieces. It is a cookie of him, dismembered, handed to him with a smile, in a kitchen, as a gesture of hospitality. Mr. Fitzgerald, meanwhile, is sitting off to one side, whittling a piece of wood. Blank expression, completely hollow look on his face. He says nothing while he does it, and the scene just lets him carry on. And then he finishes, and it turns out he's been whittling a recorder, and he plays it, and the whole thing collapses into a joke, which is Gumball all over. It will build 90 seconds of authentic dread out of nothing but body language, and then pull the rug because it's a comedy, and it has a job to do. But the part that actually gets me is Penny, because Penny joins in. She's on her family's side of this, and she applies pressure too, and the way she does it is by text message. She sends Gumball a thumbs up, and the reason she sends a thumbs up is that it was the closest thing she could find to a hand without fingers. That's the threat, a menu of emoji, and the one that most resembles her own body, sent by a girlfriend who is making a point about what she is. The horror in this whole strand of the show is entirely social. Nothing supernatural is attacking anyone. Nobody's in danger. It's a family with rules and a boy who won't follow them, and the tension comes from the fact that these people are perfectly pleasant right up until they aren't, and then perfectly pleasant again afterwards, which, if you have ever met a family with rules, is a very accurate thing for a cartoon to have noticed. And the revival picked all of it straight back up, which I was pleased about because there was a real chance it wouldn't. There's an episode in the new series called The Amadang, which was the mid-season finale of the first batch on Hulu. The premise is that Penny has a family birthday coming up. The Fitzgerald relatives are going to be there, and it's going to be tense. So Gumball volunteers to wear a shell himself and take part in the family's traditions in order to make the day easier for her, which is such a good idea for an episode. It's the reverse of the shell. Instead of a girl getting out, it's a boy voluntarily climbing in, for someone else's sake, into a set of customs he doesn't understand and can't opt out of once he's committed. The crew have said in interviews that there's more Fitzgerald material coming, and that seeing Penny's family properly was something they wanted to do, which suggests the shell thing was never a plot device they used up in season 4. It was a family, and they've kept it. Right. Let's leave the Fitzgeralds to it and go for a wander around the rest of the school, because Penny's classmates have some things going on as well. A few more Penny bits, because she's got more going on than people give her credit for. The design history first. Penny was one of the earliest characters, and she comes out of the same pool as everyone else, which is Bockley's folder of rejected advertising designs. A peanut with antlers is exactly the sort of thing that gets drawn for a commercial, gets turned down, and then sits in a drawer for years. Which means that the character, whose entire arc is about being trapped inside a form she didn't choose, was, in production terms, a design that had already been rejected once by somebody else. I'm not claiming that's intentional, I'm just saying it's there. The shape-shifting turns up in more places than people remember. Across the run, fans have logged form changes in the shell, the bros, the mirror, the romantic, the blame, the transformation, the mess, and then once more in the final episode of the original series. And the pattern of when it happens is worth noticing, because it isn't random. She changes when she's feeling something strongly and hasn't got a handle on it. Anger, mostly. Sometimes fear. The dragon is what happens when she stops managing herself, which is the same idea the show applies to Nicole, delivered completely differently. One of them turns into a whirlwind of fury, and the other one turns into an actual dragon, and both of them spend the rest of the episode dealing with what people saw. The blame is a good example if you want a smaller one. The mirror is another. Neither is a big lore episode. They're just ordinary stories where her body does something because her feelings did something first, and nobody in the episode treats it as remarkable. There's a thing about the relationship itself that I think gets underrated. Gumball and Penny are, by the standards of children's television, an unusually functional couple. They argue, they resolve things. They have episodes where the conflict is a genuine disagreement rather than a misunderstanding that could be cleared up in one sentence. The show made a deliberate decision, after 4 seasons of will they, won't they, to actually let them be together, and then write about being together, which is much harder and much less common, and the revival has kept going with it, rather than resetting. There's an episode in the new run about Penny getting nervous, asking Gumball to prom, and going to extreme lengths about it, which is the same character, several years on, still not brilliant at direct emotional communication. Consistency like that over 15 years and 3 casts is not a small achievement. One last detail. Teresa Gallagher, who I mentioned earlier voices half of Elmore, voices Penny too. So the mother and the girlfriend, the 2 women whose interior Lives the show takes most seriously, are the same performer having conversations with herself, which cannot have been easy to record and which you would never guess from listening. Actually, one more thing about the shell, because there's a reading of it I've seen a few times and I think it's worth putting on the table. The Fitzgeralds aren't presented as villains. That's the important part. Mr. and Mrs. Fitzgerald are not cruel people. They are anxious people who have inherited a set of practices and who are trying to pass them on correctly. Because passing them on correctly is what they understand love to consist of. And the shell isn't described as a punishment. It's described as protection. That's the framing inside the family. You keep it on because the world is out there, which is why the episode works and why it won what it won. If the shell had been a cage imposed by nasty parents, it would have been a much smaller story. Making it a well-meant precaution that has quietly become the whole personality of a family is a far more uncomfortable thing to put in a children's cartoon, because a lot of children watching it will recognise the shape of it and not have a word for it yet. And the show never resolves the argument. Penny gets out. Her parents do not stop being who they are. There's no episode where they apologise and take their own shells off, and everyone hugs. They keep having birthdays with strange traditions, and they keep expecting people to participate. And the newest series is still mining that for material years later, which I think is the correct choice. Families don't generally get fixed by one confrontation. They get negotiated with indefinitely, and the negotiating is the relationship. Anyway, that's the peanut. Let's go for a wander around the rest of the school, because Penny's classmates have plenty going on as well. This one's a bit more of a ramble than the last few, because it's not one episode. It's a handful of small things scattered across the run, and the connecting thread is that Gumball has a habit of handing its bleakest material to whichever character looks softest. Start with Alan. Alan is a balloon. He's a green balloon with a face. He has a girlfriend called Carmen who is a cactus, and he is, by broad agreement across the entire town, the nicest person at Elmore Junior High. He's polite. He's helpful. He never raises his voice. He is the character you would nominate if someone asked you which of these children is going to be fine. There's an episode called The Vision, in which Gumball and Darwin find a document Alan has written. It is a manifesto. That's the word the episode uses. A manifesto on how he intends to gain the power he needs to purge Elmore Junior High of its greatest problem. And the problem, as Alan has diagnosed it, is unhappiness. His solution is camps. The camps are called happy camps. And what happens at a happy camp is that people are made to act happy. And the word the episode uses for the method is torture. And if the torture doesn't take, if you're still not acting happy at the end of it, then you get corrected. The show does not linger on what corrected means. It doesn't have to. I think this is one of the sharpest jokes in the entire series, and it's sharp because it's the only place it could have landed. If the show had put that manifesto in the hands of an obvious villain, it would have been nothing. Putting it in the hands of the nicest boy in school, whose actual stated goal is for everyone to feel better, is a proper piece of writing. It understands something quite specific about how that particular disaster tends to start. Next, Sarah. Sarah Gelato is the show's self-declared #1 fan. She's a walking ice cream. She turns up increasingly often in the later seasons, and she is explicitly, openly, a fan character. She refers to the boys as the main characters. She talks about episodes. She has opinions about which arcs she prefers, which is played for laughs, and it's very funny. And then there's the fan. In the fan, she makes a video, and in the video she goes through her history with Gumball and Darwin, and what she demonstrates is that she has been present for a very large number of the events of previous episodes, not referenced. Present. She was there. She shows you where she was standing. And the thing that does to you is that it makes re-watching the show a slightly different activity. You start checking corners. She isn't in all of them, obviously, but she's in enough of them that the paranoia does its job. It's a stalker joke that has been engineered to keep working after the episode ends, which I think is a genuinely elegant piece of comedy construction, and also mildly horrible. Then there's Anais. Anais is the 4-year-old. She's the youngest Watterson. She's a small pink rabbit, and she's the cleverest person in the family by an enormous margin, which the show mostly uses for jokes about her being exasperated with everyone. 2 moments. The first is the end of an episode called The Remote, where the family have been fighting over the television all day. Anais wins. She gets everyone out of the house and locks the door. And then she puts on Daisy the Donkey, which is her show, the one everyone's been mocking her for liking. And the camera does this slow, staggered zoom in on her face while she watches it. She's smiling, serenely, clapping her hands and dancing on the sofa in complete silence with the whole family locked outside, and the zoom just keeps going. Nothing happens. That's the joke. The camera work is doing all of it. Borrowed wholesale from horror, applied to a toddler enjoying a program about a donkey. The second is The Rival, which is a flashback episode to when Anais was a baby, and which reveals that baby Anais was systematically attempting to kill her brothers, not resenting them, not being difficult, attempting, methodically, by any means she could get hold of, to remove them from the household. She's adorable throughout. That's the bit. While we're here, Susie is a chin. She's a live-action human chin with drawn-on eyes, filmed and composited into the animation. And she moves like nothing else in the show because she is somebody's actual face turned upside down. She has no explanation. She is never given one. She turns up, does something incomprehensible, and leaves. And I've always thought Susie is the smartest bit of restraint in the whole series, because the temptation to write a Susie origin episode must have been enormous, and they largely didn't do it. She's just a permanent low-level wrongness that everyone in Elmore has decided to accept, which is exactly how that sort of thing works in real life. One more, and this one's Darwin. There's a dream sequence where Darwin imagines what he'd do with $5,000, and Darwin, being the kindest character in the show by some distance, immediately decides he'd use it to save the world. So he does, he tries, and the way it plays out is that his efforts end up polluting everything instead, and the dream lands him in an empty, ruined landscape, calling out for anyone who might still be there. And then the mutants get him, on screen, eating him. That's a fantasy sequence in an episode about pocket money. There's one more thing I want to mention here, and it's from the later seasons, and it's dark by accident rather than on purpose. In The Cringe, there's a bit of backstory where it's revealed that when Gumball and the hot dog guy were babies, their mothers deliberately put them together while the hot dog guy had chicken pox, which is a pox party. That's a real thing people did, and in some places still do, on the theory that it's better to get it over with early. The episode treats it as a funny detail about two mums being friendly. And it is funny. It's also, medically speaking, a fairly bad idea, and it's an example of the show reaching for an ordinary domestic memory and accidentally picking one that's darker than the ones it invented on purpose. Anyway, that's the school. Let's talk about the thing this show does that I honestly think is the strangest of the lot, which is that it knew what it was. Right, a few more from around the school, because I've barely touched most of the class. Carrie. Carrie is a ghost. She's been dead the entire time, which the show mentions casually, and then mostly uses for jokes about not being able to eat. That's the running gag. She can't taste anything, so she possesses people in order to experience food, and it's played entirely for laughs. And if you stop and think about the arrangement for 4 seconds, it's genuinely grim. She is a dead teenager, borrowing living bodies so she can have a pizza. There's an episode where she possesses Richard, and the resulting face is one of the worst images the show ever produced. Not gory, just wrong in the eyes. She and Darwin end up together, which is a whole thing, and there are episodes about Gumball's discomfort with it. And the show gets a surprising amount of honest material out of a relationship between a boy and someone who is not technically alive. There's more of it coming in the revival as well, apparently. A double episode dedicated to them. Banana Joe next. Banana Joe is the class clown. He is a banana. His entire personality is jokes, and specifically bad jokes. And the show's position on him is that he is genuinely funny about 4% of the time, and this is enough to sustain him. His mum is Banana Barbara, who I'll come back to properly in a bit, and his home life is quietly one of the odder ones in the show. And there's a running thread in the later seasons about Banana Joe wanting to wear trousers, which the revival picks up on directly, and which is exactly the sort of extremely stupid long-form joke this series does better than anyone. Then Bobert, who is a robot and whose episodes are mostly about the gap between simulating a person and being one. There's an episode where he attempts to become more human, and the results are unsettling in the specific way that robot becomes human stories are always unsettling, which is to say, he gets it almost right. Then Molly, who I mentioned right at the start of the night, as the girl who went missing. And here's the bit that I think is quietly brilliant about how they used her afterwards. The revival has an episode built around Molly having a time-halting power, which is a decent gag on its own. But given that she is specifically the character who was once erased for being insufficiently interesting, giving her the ability to stop time and make everyone else wait feels like the writers making it up to her. And then there's The Others, which is a whole episode about this problem. The premise is that Gumball and Darwin discover there is an entire second social ecosystem at Elmore Junior High that they've never noticed. Other students, other friendship groups, other storylines happening in parallel that the show has simply never pointed a camera at. It introduces a group of new characters led by a girl called Claire Cooper, who have obviously been at that school the whole time, and who the audience has never met because the audience only sees what the protagonists are near. Claire in particular gets a proper interior life in that episode, And it's not a cheerful one. She's got a bleak outlook and a fairly rough situation, and she says so, and the episode does not fix it for her. The reason I've saved this one for last is that it's the same idea as The Void, done without any of the metaphysics. No dimension, no villain, just a school with more children in it than the show has time for, and a couple of protagonists briefly realising that everyone they walk past is the main character of something. The creators have said that when they do this kind of episode now, they know some of the new characters won't survive past their one appearance, and some of them will stick, which is a very honest thing to say out loud about a process that, in this specific show, has consequences. Here's a rule the series eventually made explicit, and it retroactively changes how a lot of earlier episodes read. If anyone in Elmore works out that they are fictional, the world ends. That's the mechanism. It got stated outright in the revival, in an episode we'll come to at the end of the night, and the specific formulation is that the Void will take everything, either when the show gets cancelled or the moment the main characters discover what they are. Two triggers. One of them is a business decision, and the other one is a thought, which means that every fourth wall joke this show ever made was, in hindsight, a near miss. And Gumball made a lot of fourth wall jokes. That's the register the whole series operates in. Characters comment on the animation. They comment on the budget. They comment on the fact that they've done this bit before. It's a show that never once pretended to be anything other than a show. And then, quite late on, it turned that into a hazard. Let me go through a few of the places where the self-awareness stops being a gag and starts being load-bearing. The future is the one with Banana Barbara. Banana Barbara is Banana Joe's mum. She's a banana, she's a bit fragile, a bit unpredictable, and she paints. That's her thing. She paints constantly in a slightly manic way, and everyone treats it as an eccentricity. Except her paintings come true. She's a prophet. She has been a prophet the entire time, in the background, being treated as the funny, neurotic mum who won't stop painting. And the show eventually confirms that what she's been producing is an accurate record of things that have not happened yet. And Rob uses her work. He goes through the paintings and he reads the ending of the show off them in advance, which means the character who understands he's in a story is using the output of a character who can see the script to predict the finale inside the finale's own show. That is a genuinely convoluted piece of business for a Cartoon Network series to attempt, and I admire the nerve of it enormously. There's a smaller detail I like even more. Barbara paints a picture of Rob falling, and when the actual moment eventually arrives at the very end of the original run, his pose in the shot is identical to the pose in her painting. Same angle, same limbs, they matched it. Then the spin-offs. The premise is that Rob hijacks the broadcast, not the town. The broadcast, he takes over the transmission of the Amazing World of Gumball and starts running fake spin-off shows in its place. And the episode becomes a run of parodies of the various awful directions a successful cartoon can get stretched in. Prequels, reboots, cheap versions. It is, structurally, an episode about a villain attacking a television network from inside its own programming, and the thing he uses as a weapon is commercial exploitation of the format. There's a moment in it where some kids open a barn door and Tina Rex is behind it and roars directly at the camera, and they all run off screaming and crying, which is nothing to do with the meta stuff and is just a very good jump scare in a cartoon. Then the vegging, which is my favourite of these because it's the smallest. The plot is that Gumball and Darwin want a day off. That's it. They want to sit on the sofa and do nothing for one day, and the universe won't let them. Every time they settle, something happens. The interruptions escalate, and they escalate specifically in ways that endanger the family, and the reading the episode is steering you towards is that this is not bad luck. It's structural. They are in a program, and the program requires incident, and a day of nothing is not something the format can accommodate. At one point, the sofa turns into a cardboard prop, and there's a flash of static. Just a flash, which by that point in the series means one very specific thing, because static is Rob. Then the copycats, which is the one where the show did something to a real company on air. There was a Chinese series called Miracle Star that was, to put it charitably, extremely similar to Gumball. Same family structure, same character designs, more or less. It got a fair amount of attention online when people noticed. Gumball's response was to make an episode about it. The Wattersons meet a family who copy everything they do and say, and the copies are drawn in a slightly off version of the show's own style. And the episode is about the experience of watching something wear your face badly. I still think that's an astonishing thing for a network to have signed off. It's not subtle, and it's not really disguised. It's a show using an episode of itself to deal with a rip-off of itself, and doing it as comedy, so nobody has to send a legal letter. Then the boredom, which is aged in a way nobody planned. It's got cameos in it, characters from Clarence, from Regular Show, from Uncle Grandpa, turning up briefly as background presence. At the time, it was just a nice bit of network family business, the sort of thing Cartoon Network did constantly in that era. All three of those shows have since ended. Cartoon Network itself has had a rough few years, so the episode now functions entirely by accident as a snapshot of a schedule that doesn't exist anymore. And every one of those cameos is a small memorial, which is exactly the kind of thing this show would have done on purpose if it had thought of it. And then there's the cast, which is the strangest bit of the lot. Gumball had a lot of voice actors. Because the main characters are children and children's voices break, the show cycled through performers repeatedly across its run. Gumball alone was voiced by several different people over the 6 seasons. Darwin as well. Most shows just quietly swap the actor and hope nobody says anything. Gumball started treating it as evidence. The characters noticed that their voices keep changing. They noticed that their designs changed between the first and second seasons, which they did, quite noticeably. They noticed they haven't had a birthday in years despite time apparently passing, and the show gathers all of these ordinary production facts up and files them as symptoms, not jokes about production, clues that something is wrong with the world. That's the move that I think is genuinely unusual. Loads of cartoons break the fourth wall for a laugh. Gumball took the actual mechanical realities of making a long-running animated series, the recasting, the redesigns, the frozen ages, the continuity errors, and turned all of them into in-universe evidence of a problem the characters are not allowed to solve. The show's own production history is the thing haunting it. Anyway, speaking of things that are different depending on where you're standing, not everything dark about this show is in the show. Couple more of these, because once you start looking for it, the show is absolutely riddled with them. The countdown is a good one. It starts as a perfectly ordinary race against the clock episode, with a timer on screen and a task to complete. And then, about halfway through, it stops being that and becomes something else entirely. And the timer turns out not to be measuring what you thought it was measuring. I won't spoil the turn because it's better cold, but the structural trick is that the episode uses a piece of standard television grammar, the on-screen countdown, and then reveals that the grammar itself was the thing to worry about. Then there's the sheer volume of episodes about the making of things. Gumball has an unusual number of stories about production, episodes about making a film, episodes about writing, episodes about the show's own format. The tape is the boys making home movies. The stories is a storytelling anthology. There's a strand running through the series where the characters are constantly generating media, and the show is constantly using that to talk about itself. Most cartoons do one episode like that. Gumball did dozens, and then made the accumulated weight of them into a plot point. Here's the thing I keep coming back to about the void rule though, and it's the bit I find genuinely clever rather than just fun. The rule is that the world ends if the characters realise they are fictional, or if the show is cancelled, and what that does is fuse two completely different kinds of danger into one threat. One of them is a philosophical problem inside the story. The other is a commissioning decision made by executives in an office, and the show treats them as the same event, which is, if you squint, entirely correct. From the point of view of a character, there is no meaningful difference between discovering you're fictional and your network deciding not to order any more of you. Either way, you stop. That's a genuinely serious idea, presented in a series where a chin has a speaking role, and it puts the audience in a slightly odd position, because the thing that keeps Elmore existing is that people keep watching. The threat is real, and we're the ones holding it off. That's not a metaphor the show belabors. It's just sitting there, structurally, once you've noticed it. One last one, and it's small. There's a moment in a late episode where the characters discuss the plot holes in their own lives. And one of the things they land on is that the upstairs window of their house has never matched the interior. Which is true. It never has. Anyone who has ever looked closely at the Watterson house has noticed it. It's an ordinary background inconsistency of the kind that every animated series accumulates over a few hundred episodes, because backgrounds get redrawn by different people and nobody has time to check. And the show found it, and instead of quietly fixing it, made it evidence. I love that. Somebody on that team looked at a mistake in their own artwork and decided it was a clue. There's one more of these I want to squeeze in, and it's the one that people bring up most in comment sections, which is the finale. The premise is that the Wattersons finally face consequences. All of them. Every piece of property damage, every act of vandalism, every insurance claim and broken window, and municipal inconvenience the family has caused across the entire run of the show, arriving at once as a bill. And it works because Gumball had been quietly keeping score. The episode is built out of callbacks to specific incidents from specific earlier episodes, which means it functions as an audit of the show's own history. The title is a bluff, obviously. It wasn't the finale, it was the third season. But the episode plays it completely straight, right up to the point where it has to resolve, and the resolution it lands on is one of the more cheerfully cynical things the show ever did about how consequences actually work in a sitcom. Which is the thread running through this entire section, when I look back at it. Gumball's relationship with its own format is not affectionate exactly. It's more like the relationship you have with a job you're good at. It knows exactly what the rules are. It knows why they exist, it follows most of them, and every so often it points at one of them and says something unkind about it. And the show got away with that for 8 years on a children's network, which is the genuinely remarkable part. Right, practical bit. The Amazing World of Gumball went out on Cartoon Network channels in more than 160 countries, and a show that travels that far does not arrive intact. Let's start with the rating, because the rating is the bit that surprises people. For most of its original run, Gumball carried a TV Y7 rating in the United States. Y7, suitable for children aged 7 and up. That's the rating on the show, with the joy outbreak and the manifesto about the camps and the character who wants to erase the protagonist from existence. Later material sits at TV PG, and the revival is PG throughout, which is a slightly more honest description of what's actually on screen. But for the seasons that most people grew up on, the classification was Y7, and the writers spent 6 years standing on the line of it. Now, the regional versions. This is the part where I have to be a bit careful about what I'm claiming, so let me split it into what's solid and what's fan reconstruction, because there's a lot of both floating about. The solid bit is this. Cartoon Network maintains separate feeds for different regions, and those feeds carry different edits. That's not a rumour, that's just how international broadcast works. There is a version of Gumball for the Middle East and North Africa, a version for Turkey, versions for various Asian markets, versions for Latin America, versions for a load of individual European countries, and they are not all the same length, which means 2 people can finish the same episode having watched different amounts of it, without either of them ever finding out. Same title, same number, different runtime. The less solid bit is the detail. Fans have spent years compiling lists of exactly which scene got trimmed in which country. And those lists live on wikis, and they're enormous and inconsistent and mostly unsourced. So when I mention specific episodes here, take it as what the fan community has managed to piece together rather than as anything anyone at Turner ever published. With that caveat, here's the interesting pattern. The edits are almost never about violence. Go and look at what fans have catalogued, and the categories are remarkably consistent. Kissing gets cut. Hugging between characters who are supposed to be a couple gets cut. Anything that reads as romantic between kids gets cut. And in some markets, the words boyfriend and girlfriend get redubbed as just friend. Characters in their underwear get cut. Characters cross-dressing get cut. Anything involving backsides gets cut, which in a show with an episode literally called The Butts is a fairly significant amount of runtime. References to intoxication get cut. There's a fan-reported case of the phrase bath salts being changed in reruns to soap suds, which is a very funny sentence to say out loud. And there's a set of episodes that fans report as being dropped entirely in certain markets. The slap comes up most often because the whole episode is built on a joke about Gumball trying to get Tobias to slap him on the backside, and the innuendo is not exactly buried. The matchmaker gets reported as pulled in a few places over the romance between Darwin and Carrie. The Choices gets reported as pulled in at least one market because of the flashback with Nicole and Richard, which is the one that gets me, honestly, the single most emotionally sophisticated episode in the entire show, cut because two young people fall in love in it. Meanwhile, the Outbreak episode airs, the manifesto airs, the one where the villain systematically dismantles a family and throws a child into a void airs. As far as I can tell, none of that has ever caused a scheduling problem anywhere. So the line everywhere in the world is bodies and relationships, almost never dread, almost never cruelty. You can put a boy in a place where forgotten things go and have him nearly stay there, and that clears standards in every territory on the planet, but you cannot show him kissing his girlfriend. I don't think that's unique to Gumball. I think it's just unusually visible in Gumball because the show is so aggressively varied that the cuts stand out. But it's a decent illustration of what censors are actually scanning for, which is not harm exactly. It's embarrassment. There's another layer to this now, which is streaming. And streaming has made the whole thing messier rather than tidier. Because the uncut versions do exist, and they're generally the ones on the streaming platforms. Netflix carried the show internationally with the uncensored versions, no episodes missing. Hulu carries the revival and the American cuts of the older seasons. Australia's Stan has been reported by fans as uncut. HBO Max carried it for a while and then dropped it in 2024, which caused its own small panic. So you now get a situation where the same household can watch two different versions of the same episode depending on which app they open. The telly gives you the edited one, the phone gives you the whole thing, and nobody tells you which is which. There's one more category worth mentioning, which is the stuff that got softened in production rather than in distribution. The show's own writers were negotiating with standards constantly, and you can see the shape of that negotiation in the finished episodes if you know to look. There's a particular kind of Gumball joke that goes right up to something, and then swerves at the last second, and the swerve is usually the tell. The line about people being in their bedrooms at the end of the day in The Slap is a good example. It stayed in most versions and got cut in Spain, and the fact that it was borderline enough to be cut somewhere tells you it was borderline everywhere. Bocchiale and the current team have said in interviews that the stories come from real places, from things that actually happen to people on the staff, and I think that's the source of the friction. The show keeps reaching for genuine adolescent and domestic material, and genuine adolescent material is the exact material that broadcast standards are built to sand down. Anyway, here's a small concrete thing to leave this on. If you grew up watching Gumball in Turkey or in the Gulf, and you go back and watch it now on a streaming service, you will find jokes in it you have never seen. Not deleted scenes, not extras. Just the episode, running slightly longer than the one you remember, with a bit in the middle that wasn't there, which must be a very strange evening. Right, last one, and then I'll leave you to it. Let's talk about how this show ended, and then how it ended again. 2 more strands on this, and then I'll stop being an administrator about it. The first is dubbing, which is a form of editing that nobody thinks of as editing. Gumball went out in an enormous number of languages, and a dub is not a translation. A dub is a rewrite performed under the constraint of matching mouth movements, and the person doing it is making judgment calls about tone on every single line. Which matters more for this show than for most, because so much of Gumball's comedy is in delivery rather than in content. The joke is frequently that somebody said an ordinary sentence in a very slightly wrong way. That is close to untransferable. A dub has to find a new joke or drop it, and different territories made different choices, and the result is that the show's personality varies by language in ways that don't show up in any censorship list. There's a whole separate conversation to be had about which countries' dubs are considered the good ones by their own audiences, and I'm not qualified to have it, but it exists and people are passionate about it. The second strand is the pilot, which almost nobody has seen properly. There is a Gumball pilot made in 2008, 3 years before the series went to air. It was made when Cartoon Network's European studio was very new, and everyone in it had been told to pitch something. And the reason it matters here is that the pilot is the earliest version of the mixed media idea, made before anyone knew if it would hold up. It's rougher, the designs aren't settled, it's the shape of the show without any of the confidence, which puts it in an odd category. It's not banned, it's not hidden, it's just not distributed, because pilots generally aren't, and so it exists mostly as something people have seen clips of, rather than something you can sit down and watch. That's a different kind of missing from the regional edits. Nobody decided to remove it. It simply never got a release, and 18 years later, it's still sitting in the same drawer. Right, one last thought on all of this and then we'll move on properly. The reason I find the censorship stuff worth an entire section rather than a footnote is that it's the one part of this show's story that isn't authored. Everything else we've talked about tonight was somebody's decision. Somebody wrote The Void, somebody designed the Joy virus, somebody sat in a room in London and worked out that the sad way to introduce a villain is to have the heroes offer him the job. The regional cuts aren't like that. There's no vision behind them. There's a compliance officer in an office looking at a spreadsheet and a set of standards, making a call about a 12-second scene and moving on to the next episode in the queue. And you stack up thousands of those, made separately, over about 15 years, and what you end up with is a show about people getting edited out of existence that has itself been quietly edited in about 40 different directions at once. Nobody planned that. It's just what happens when a piece of work goes out into the world and the world starts handling it. Oh, and one small thing I nearly forgot, which is my favourite of the fan-reported edits, purely for how petty it is. There is apparently a version of The Test that was dropped in a couple of markets, and the reason given is the ending, where Gumball is sick on Tobias. Not the poisoning, not the melted face, the vomit, if that's accurate. And I want to stress that this is fan-compiled and not something anyone official has confirmed. Then somewhere there is a document in which a professional made the determination that a boy being physically poisoned by his own sincerity was fine, and a boy being sick was not. I'd genuinely love to read that document. The last shot of the Amazing World of Gumball is a freeze frame of a man falling. The episode is The Inquisition. It went out on the 24th of June 2019 and it is the 240th episode of the show. The plot is one of the most on-the-nose things they ever did, and I mean that as a compliment. A school superintendent arrives at Elmore Junior High. He's called Superintendent Evil, which is not subtle, and he was voiced by Garrick Hagan, who among other things was in the first Star Wars film. He has come to inspect the school. What he's actually come to do is remove the cartoonishness. That's his project. He goes through the building converting the students into realistic live-action humans. Actual filmed people dropped into the show. The whole visual identity of Elmore, which as we've talked about, is this deliberate collision of styles and media, gets systematically flattened into one boring, consistent look. And it's genuinely eerie to watch, because the show has spent 8 years training you to accept a world where a chin and a peanut and a dinosaur can share a corridor, and then it starts replacing them with people, and the people look wrong in a way that's hard to articulate. Gumball and Darwin go round undoing it, and the way they undo it is entirely built out of the show's own history, which I thought was a lovely touch for a finale. They turn Banana Joe back by singing the Banana Symphony, which is a song from an earlier episode. They fix Susie using a callback to the episode where she was properly introduced. Penny goes full dragon, which by that point is her 4th time doing it. It's a victory lap disguised as a rescue. They win, Superintendent Evil is dealt with, everything's fine, and then it's night and the school is empty and Rob wakes up in it alone. And the floor starts going. He holds on, he tries, and he says, right at the end, that it started. Then he loses his grip and falls, and the shot freezes on him mid-fall in exactly the pose from Banana Barbara's painting, and the first notes of the credits music come in. To be continued. It was not continued for 6 years. Bockelay was fairly open about this at the time. Fans were, to put it mildly, unhappy, and a chunk of that landed on him personally, and he said publicly that ending it that way was not his choice. He also said that if the film happened, everything would land properly. So, the film, announced in February 2021, greenlit that September under the title The Amazing World of Gumball, the movie with Bockelay directing and executive producing. The premise that got announced was lovely actually. Gumball's biggest fan, a real person in the real world, finds a lost episode of the show and accidentally opens a portal between his world and Elmore. Then in August 2022, it was dropped from the streamer it was going to, along with several other projects, in the same clear-out. Bockelay described its status afterwards as a bit of a Schrödinger's cat question, and then added that deep down he believed the cat was alive. At Annecy in 2024, he confirmed it wasn't dead. He said the script was still being worked on, that his take on the story had changed over the intervening years, and that this was both a good thing and a bad thing. As I'm recording this, that's still roughly where it sits. There is no confirmed release. There's a lot of stuff online claiming there is, with dates and casts and posters, and essentially all of it is fan speculation dressed up convincingly. So treat anything you see with a bit of caution. What actually resolved the cliffhanger wasn't the film. It was the revival. At Annecy in 2023, a 7th season was announced. In 2024, it was confirmed as in full production. And in 2025, it turned out it wasn't going to be called Season 7 at all. It was going to be its own thing, called The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball. It landed on Hulu on the 28th of July, 2025. It went out internationally on Cartoon Network and HBO Max from the 6th of October. A second batch arrived just before Christmas that year, and then in December, 2 further seasons got ordered, which for a show that everyone had written off in 2019 is a fairly remarkable position to be in. New voices, obviously. Alkayo Thiele as Gumball, Hero Hunter as Darwin, Kinza Syed Khan as Anais, Teresa Gallagher and Dan Russell came back as Nicole and Richard, which matters more than it sounds like it should, because those two have been there since the very first episode. And the answer to the cliffhanger came at the end of the 2nd season, in an episode called the rewrite. They saved it deliberately. Bocquelet said in an interview that the decision to put it last was so that people could get used to the new voices and settle back into the world before they went anywhere near the heavy lore. The way it works is this. Gumball comes home and points out to Darwin that the upstairs window doesn't line up with the inside of the house, which is true. It never has. It's an ordinary background inconsistency of the sort every animated series accumulates, and they start comparing notes. The window, the fact that they haven't had a birthday in 7 years, the way their designs changed, the way their voices keep changing. They are, in real time, assembling the case. And somewhere else, a phone rings, and Rob gets told that if those two finish the thought, everyone goes into the void. The rest of the episode is Rob and his new employer, the tenant of the Awesome Store, using a cross-dimensional laptop to edit the script of the episode they're currently in order to stop the two main characters from reaching a conclusion. There are jokes in it about writing within studio guidelines, which is the sort of thing that only works if you've earned it, and by that point they very much have. And the shape of where it leaves everyone is what I actually want to end on. Because Rob takes a job, he gets a uniform, he inherits the Awesome Store from the shady man, who has bought himself a door into paradise with the proceeds of everything he's flogged over the years, and is off. And Rob's responsibility from now on is protecting Elmore from the void. He's insecure about it. He says so. The man tells him there's a button if things go badly, presses it, and sends him home. So the character who came into existence by being forgotten, who got torn apart escaping the place, forgotten things go, who was handed the villain job by two children who were trying to be nice, is now the thing standing between his town and that place. I think that's about as neat a landing as you could ask for. The show whose central threat has always been cancellation got cancelled, sat in the dark for 6 years, came back and wrote the whole experience into its own mythology. A couple of extra things about the gap, because it was a long one, and things did happen in it. There were 2 miniseries. The first was Darwin's Yearbook, which went out on Cartoon Network in December 2019, 6 episodes, about Darwin trying to fill in the school yearbook. And the honest description of it is that it's largely a clip show. It's built out of recycled footage from earlier episodes, with new framing material around it. The second was the Gumball Chronicles from October 2020, which is the same idea again. 8 episodes, clips reframed. 4 of them went out back to back in November of that year, with an election theme, all beginning with the words "Vote Gumball," about Gumball trying to find a running mate for a school presidency campaign. Neither of those is anybody's favourite Gumball, and I don't think they were meant to be. They read to me as a network keeping a valuable property warm, while the actual plans were being argued about somewhere upstairs, which is a perfectly reasonable thing for a network to do, and also means that for about 5 years, the only new Gumball anybody got was old Gumball with a bow on it. There's also a changing of the guard worth mentioning, because it's the kind of detail that only registers if you care about this stuff. Mike Graves directed every single episode of the first 4 seasons. Everyone. That's 150 plus 11-minute films with the same person in the chair, which is an extraordinary run and a very large part of why the show's timing is so consistent across such wildly different visual approaches. And Ben Lockett wrote the theme and scored the series from the beginning. The Inquisition was the last episode he composed for. The revival brought in a new composer, Zav Clark, who'd already been working on the 6th season, so when the show came back, the people at the top had shifted. Bocquelet describes himself as having stepped back into more of an advisory role, with Matt Lazell showrunning and Eric Fountain supervising direction, and he's joked about giving a thumbs up or thumbs down like an emperor, which the others have politely contradicted by saying he's still the one they take a broken episode to, which is roughly what you'd want, honestly. The person who built it staying close enough to catch it when it wobbles, without having to write every line himself for another decade. One more thing about the rewrite, and then I'll wrap up. The episode does something at the end that I keep thinking about. The shady man, having sold dangerous nonsense to the residents of Elmore for years, cashes out. He opens a door to a paradise he has bought with the proceeds of everything he's flogged, and he goes through it, and he leaves the van and the job to Rob, and he wishes him luck. That's it. No comeuppance. He made a fortune arming children with reality-altering devices, and he retires comfortably, which is the funniest possible way to resolve that character, and also, I suspect, the most accurate. And I think that's a reasonable place to leave it. I didn't get to everything. Whole Void episodes went untouched. The revival has a stack of nasty little background details I never reached. And there are about 4 things still sitting in my notes that lost out on space. They'll keep. The thing I keep turning over about all this is the mismatch I mentioned right at the start, and how comfortably the show sits in it. 240 episodes of a series that won more children's animation awards than almost anything else of its era. And underneath the whole thing is a sustained, patient, 6-season argument about what happens to people the world stops looking at. Not delivered as a lesson, never once stated plainly, just built into the machinery in the shape of a background character who wasn't drawn enough times. And the fact that the show came back, and the first serious thing it did on returning was give that character a job and a purpose and somewhere to be, feels like the right end to it, even if it isn't the end. It probably isn't. Anyway, that's where my head's at on it, for whatever that's worth at this time of night. Night all. Hope it's a good one.